All right, we are going to hang out tonight initially in Matthew 25. Matthew 25. And Caroline and I have never done a study like this before, and so it's make it up as you go along. No, excuse me, there is a great strategy that is unfolding. Anyway, but just trying to see what holes we may leave from week to week, if there's things that we need to address, or we've got a map that we're working from, directions that we want to go and things that we want to cover. But it felt like there was some things left hanging on the vine from last week that we want to pick up with and flesh out a little bit more. And obviously, we could talk at length about issues related to finances and families because it affects and intersects so much of our lives. So we're not going to be talking about this indefinitely, but at least spend tonight thinking about a couple of different aspects of our life as families and our experience with finances. And the good thing about that is that regardless of your age or stage, you've got finances or the lack thereof, and you've got family, and trying to figure out how to navigate all that. Look with me again, Matthew 25, and we're just going to walk through this story and then just try to glean some stuff from it and go from there. All right, so verse 14 says, Jesus is talking. This is a parable. What's a parable? It's a story. It's an illustration. And so illustrations drive points home. They appeal to a listener or reader's imagination, and they help people get and understand concepts that otherwise they might have struggled with. So he says, it is just like a man about to go on a journey. He called his own servants and entrusted his possessions to them. To one he gave 5 talents, to another 2 talents, and to another 1 talent, depending on each one's ability. Then he went on a journey. Immediately the man who had received 5 talents went, put them to work, and earned 5 more. In the same way the man who earned 2 talents earned 2 more. But the man who had received 1 talent went off, dug a hole in the ground, and hid his master's money. After a long time the master of those servants came and settled accounts with him. The man who had received 5 talents approached, presented 5 more, and said, Master, you gave me 5 talents. See, I've earned 5 more. And his master said, Well done, good and faithful servant. You were faithful over a few things. I will put you in charge of many things. Share your master's joy. Then the man with 2 talents also approached. He said, Master, you gave me 2 talents. See, I've earned 2 more. His master said to him, Well done, good and faithful servant. You were faithful over a few things. I'll put you in charge of many. Share your master's joy. And then the man who received 1 talent approached, and he said, Master, I know you. You're a harsh man, reaping where you haven't sown, gathering where you haven't scattered seed. So I was afraid, went off and hid your talent in the ground. See, you have what is yours. So his master said, You evil, lazy servant, if you knew that I reap where I haven't sown and gather where I haven't scattered, then you should have deposited my money with the bankers, and I would have received my money back with interest when I returned. So take the talent from him and give it to the one who has 10 talents. For everyone who has, more will be given. He who has, and he will have more than enough. But from the one who does not have, even what he has will be taken from him. And throw this good-for-nothing servant into the outer darkness, where there will be weeping and gnashing of teeth. That's clear as a bell, isn't it? Thank you for being here tonight. And so, now, anyway. So right now, I just want you to think about the story and what's going on. And so let's just make sure that we've got those events in the frame of our mind. So what's going on? You've got what? Say it again? Well, so there's 3 servants. And who? 1 master. And what else happens? Yeah, I didn't even do the math. So there's 6 bags of. So there's. No. Oh, it's. Yeah. 8. See, this is why we need to talk about finances. 5 plus 2. Anyway, all right. So there's 8 talents, and that's pretty clear. The talents are. What's that? That's the little bit of moolah. All right, and so does everybody get the same? All right, so 1 gets 5 talents, the other one gets 2, the other gets 1. All right, so what happens? The master goes away. And so, and it seems that all his stuff he's entrusted to their care. He leaves, he comes back. How long is he gone? We don't know. Yeah, so a long time, whatever a long time is. And so when he comes back, what happens? All right, so this one is 10, 4, and a big fat 1. Because what did this guy do? He had dug a hole and buried it, which is like if you were to put money in the bank right now, that's effectively digging a hole and burying it because there is no such thing as interest right now. But, yeah, mattress, something like that. And so as he presents his 10, the master says, all right, so well done. When this guy, all right, so he gets a well done. And, oh no. Test. Is this? This one becomes well done. Oh, yes, he's toast. All right, so so very pleased with these two, not at all pleased with this one. All right. Every time Jesus tells a parable, it is not because it's like, I want to entertain the people for a little while. Let me just, what could come to mind? Let me spin a yarn for them. There's always, there's application. There is truth that he's trying to drive home, points that he's trying to help them to get in ways that otherwise they might not. So, we started this a little bit. So it's pretty clear that the talents represents money, right? All right. So, and how about master? It's pretty reasonable that that's God. And servants, all right, so they're servants. So that would be those that are the servants of the master. So that anybody that's one of his followers, we follow, hopefully if you have a relationship with Christ, you fall into this category. All right, so as I said, Jesus, it seems pretty clear, is aiming, and it takes a little imagination to realize this and even to extract some of this, but he's seeking to drive points home. So what's the point of this? Like what are the lessons that he's seeking to communicate?
Michael, I have a question. I was asking Kieran, because I thought this wasn't actually related to money. I thought this was more like going to share the gospel, and like the guy who, he didn't go tell anybody, and so that's why he was like, you didn't do a good job. You
Well, there's
yourself. That's what I thought it was.
there's
I don't know why I thought that.
it. Do I?
Verse 27 says bankers.
I think it is more, again, when you're talking story, in interpretation, there is some subjective stuff. And I'm not suggesting that you can't make the case that's not possibly an application. In my estimation, the most direct application has to do with the stuff that he's entrusted to our care. But what would you say in terms of points to drive home? Even if we take the parable and we're looking at it through the lens of financial, material possession stuff, what are the lessons that you could extrapolate from this? Say it again.
Investment.
What about it?
Like, you want to grow your money?
All right, so so you want to grow what you've been entrusted with.
Use it or lose it.
Do what?
Use it or lose it.
Sure. Use it, lose it.
Or lose it.
Yeah, so I put the slash. What else? Let's think about it this way. All right, so you have this master that is entrusting into the hands of the servants talents. How many talents does this servant have? Where did he get those? How many does he have? How many of them came from the Master? So there's a lesson there. Yeah, so everything I have, in fact, so everything I have comes from him. Do these individuals, all three of them, do they possess these things in perpetuity? No, so that they are possessing them for a season. So what would our lesson be? Well, even more basic than that. So everything I have, temporarily. And as a subset of that, I'm not really an owner per se. I'm a possessor for a period of time. So the Master is gone for an indefinite period of time. Do they know how long he's going to be gone? No, they don't know how long he's going to be gone. But he comes back, and so when he comes back, what does he do? Well, he settles. So we actually have a more proper word for that. We call that, and yeah. So there's I experience or will experience. So, and just in terms of basic application, that which he has entrusted to my care, and it's, in truth, these are principles that don't just apply to money, but it's everything that he's entrusted to my care, whether it is money or stuff, or it's my children, it's my time, it's my gifts, it's my everything. Virtually because everything that we have because it's been entrusted to our care temporarily. So obviously we're thinking about this specifically tonight through the lens of material things and financial stuff, but you can plug anything in here. And it is a reminder that there is going to be, for all of us that are his servants, there is going to be an accounting. And as I experience an accounting, what should I hope for? Yeah, so I'm looking for well done. All right? We are thinking about everything that we have been in the weeks to come with respect to family through this lens of the finish line, and kind of thinking about what does the finish line look like? What does the end game look like? And then working back from there, because in the first week we talked about not all roads lead to any destination. All roads are paths that lead to a destination, but they don't all lead to the same one. And so you need to think about what's the destination that I'm seeking to go to, and then what are the paths that are going to help me get there, because not every path is going to get there. So we're thinking about this again specifically with respect to finances and material things. The finish line is what? You're dismissed, Debbie. No, I'm sorry. I said the finish line is what? God's approval. Is God's approval. In fact, you could even say it this way, that the finish line for me, and so what I hope it to be is that I stand before the Lord one day and that's what I hear. Well done, good and faithful servant, enter into the joy of the Lord. That's what I want. So if that's the finish line, is just with respect to finances, and I'm going to give an accounting to him with the stuff, the physical, material stuff that he's entrusted to my care. If I just use that in any old way and I do whatever I want to with it, however, are all roads going to result in this? They're not. They're not. So that's what we want to think about tonight. What is going to, in my life, in my family's life, help me to get to that point? And so that is what Caroline gets.
That bothered me a little bit about last week is I felt like we identified the problem, but then we kind of carried it home. Like it was like, oh, our culture's tough, right? There's this expectation of us that we're being inundated with wherever we are, our children are, And it bothered me that I felt like we went home with that. I actually don't get a lot of opportunity to speak with adults. From the moment I wake up, I'm with littles. At church, I'm usually with littles. And this summer, Beth Whitman had the burden to have a preschool VBS, which ended up being fantastic. And what was really fantastic about it is we had an opportunity to speak to the parent that was bringing the children. They offered a breakfast, and those parents stayed. When Beth shared that that was going to happen, I felt a burden to say to her, if you have an opening, I would like to talk on how to teach the Bible to your family. And it kind of came out before I realized I actually don't talk to adults a whole lot. So then I went home and sweat for a while as I thought, ooh, because Beth said yes. And it was fantastic to get to speak to these young mothers. And one of the ladies came up to me afterwards and said, I really appreciate y'all doing this, because all we hear all the time is raise your child up, train them in the Word. And then they never really tell us how. They never really say what worked, what didn't work, resources to use. It's just they cast a vision for you, and you don't necessarily have the tools. And so last week I felt a little bit like, I think we can talk about some tools. How do we fight this message that our culture is trying to weigh us down with? And so tonight, we're going to talk about just a few things, and some other things may come up that I didn't even think about. But how Michael and I have learned to fight some of this is kind of simple, and it's celebrating the virtues that he values and reminding of yourself that constantly. One of the things that God values is modesty. And so anybody who has a teenager is probably giggling right now, because I talk a lot about swimsuits. I talk a lot about one of my goals is to cover up this next generation. I want more clothes on people. And so when you hear the word modesty, what do you think? Basic? Yeah, actually that's good. Michael said less is more, and I was like, yeah, I don't say that with the youth. And he's like, no, less skin is more. But yeah, so basic. What else do you think of when you hear the word modesty? Say it again. Yes. And that's actually probably where I'm going to, is you don't bring attention to yourself. And I tell Michael sometimes when I watch these women evangelists, because I'll watch these women sharing some word, and a lot of times they're dressed very expensive. Their hairstyle is something that would be expensive to keep up. And I think I really would like to see some straight up frontline, a woman who is not concerned, just has her hair pulled back and share how she ministers to people, and that it's not very glamorous. Those are the people sometimes I wish we got to hear from. And I'm not saying that to dress nicely or expensive clothes, all of that's going to kind of be subjective. But I would feel like if the goal is to bring attention to yourself, then that's something we need to get in check. But it doesn't even have to do with our clothes or our appearance. What else could we want to have that's flashy? Car. You're right, whatever possession it could be. It could be your car, it could be your home. But one of the things that we're blessed with is a variety of people in our life. And one of the things I do, I drive way too far, but I drive an hour into the country for fiddle lessons on this 100-acre farm. And it's so refreshing to me, because nothing in that farmhouse is new, right? Nothing. Something might have been recovered, and it's all very simple. And I love going over there. I'm so comfortable. The people are so down to earth, and I'm grateful for that, because it kind of gives me a reset sometimes when you're inundated with a different view of what's accepted, that everything has to be just right, and those colors are so last year, those pink colors are so last year. It's always very humbling to me to get to go there and remind me, none of that matters. None of that matters. Any other thoughts on modesty?
I think about the way people speak, but just the volume of the look and the attitude, and just everything is about. When you say not to bring attention to yourself, that's the first thing I thought was just, oh, look,
Because most of the time, when we hear the word modesty, our first thought is what? Is clothes. But is that I mean, I think God values modesty in clothing, but how about this other? I mean, does He value modesty in this other stuff?
First thing I thought of was the people of Pennsylvania, the Amish.
Oh, the Amish.
That's the first vision I had for Bill Peters.
Buttons.
Well, I think that sometimes when we get inundated with this message of, well, and it is, our culture is very much like, create a YouTube channel, like you know, have people look at you, be the center of attention. That is prevalent in our world right now, and I do catch myself. Like, we are also blessed to have friends that have a lot more wealth than we are, and we're blessed to have friends that are living paycheck to paycheck. And admittedly, sometimes when I'm around the friends that have a lot, the money can help you look really good. I mean, it's just like it does. Like, you can even look at artists when they begin. I hate to talk about my girl Alison Krauss, but like when she started out, like, look at her before, after, and look at her after. Money really brought a lot to the table for her and for most celebrities. But it's like, I'll even tell Michael sometimes when we're around them, like, I'll be like, does this bother you right here? Like this, he calls it the coin slot. Like, because I'm like, you know, I could get Botox, I could do this right here, or like, you know, they've had like procedures done, and it makes me feel like, ooh, like, am I missing the boat here? And this is something that I tell myself. I think, Caroline, who do you want to be like in this world? And one of the people I want to be like is Elizabeth Elliot. And she was a missionary. She lost her husband when they had a young child, and you should read her biography. It's fantastic. Anyway.
I want to be like this widow. That,
oh, yeah, no, that was not that. She has this gap in her teeth that's like, I mean, it's not about you. But like, you have this, like, she has this gap in her teeth. And I love watching her and speaking because, like, she drips with beauty. Like, you just want to listen to what she says. And, like, I love that she has a gap in between her teeth. Like, I mean, yeah, you did all this wonderful stuff for Jesus, but I'm really grateful for your gap. Like, she was not worried about what her appearance said to others. She knew that her value and her beauty came from the Lord. And so regularly I have to check myself, and maybe y'all don't. Maybe some of this is very obvious to y'all. But I have to remind myself, who is it that I want to be? Is that important to me? And in truth, every woman in my family, like when I look in the mirror, I kind of look like them. We had dark hair, we have light eyes, we have the coin slot, like, right? Like, we carry weight in the same space. And I want my daughter to realize that she looks beautiful. She looks like us. This is what we look like. You don't have to, whatever the trends are. I mean, when I was in my 20s, it was like ridiculously thin eyebrows. Now it's like ridiculous thick eyebrows, right? Like, it changes. But I want my daughter to know she's beautiful. She looks like us, and this is what we look like, right? Not chasing what the world is telling us is beautiful or important. Another thing that, like, I have to remind myself, and maybe y'all do too, is a virtue that God values is really, like, people matter more than money. I don't believe that God wants us chasing money. I believe He wants us chasing relationships. And a lot of times, you can't chase relationships if you're chasing money. In my own life, God called me to walk away from many business opportunities. After I accepted Christ, I was in a sales job, and Michael and I had not met yet, but when I accepted Christ, I could not breathe from Sunday to Sunday. Like, He saved me out of a very worldly life, and I couldn't just be with God's people Sunday to Sunday. I had to be there Wednesday. I really had to be there anytime the doors were open. And in a sales job, I'd have to be gone a lot. And I realized that if I keep this job, I'll only be able to be there Sunday mornings. I'll never actually be a part of the fellowship. And my eyes were open to some things that were around me that at first didn't bother me before I was saved. But after I was saved, I realized I don't want this life. I realized how hard it was on the marriage and the family to be gone all the time. I made really good money, but I also saw a lot of abuse of alcohol in the sales position. And so I had to ask my boss for a demotion so that I could come and be home, simply so I could be at church. I knew I could not make it from Sunday morning to Sunday morning and do this. And I didn't want to end up like everybody else. They gave me that demotion, and it was fine. I ended up moving to a different job at the police department. I I felt valued. I felt like it played to my strengths. I knew how to do this, and I could still have my family, but then I found out that I couldn't excel at both. After having 3 boys at home, and all of them were preschool age, the Lord put on a burden for me to walk away from that job, who also carried the health insurance, which is tricky. So even though we had been saving my income, we were about to live off his income, and it less because we'd have to pay for health insurance. I say that to y'all not because like, woo, we did it, but like, that doesn't make sense in this culture. You don't do that. You don't walk away from health insurance. You don't walk away from a job that provides. But we have been blessed immeasurably for these small little decisions along the way. And I don't even think that I had the courage within me. I think God just made it like so plain to me. This is what you have to do. And so if you ever have something in your life that God's calling you to do, I would encourage you to be strong about it, because like there's so much beauty around the corner you can't see yet. Because after I walked away from that job, it wasn't long before we got a call from Ed Carmichael about Greensboro. I'm not saying it was a test. I am saying I noticed it, right? Like and it took a year from that first phone call before Michael was interviewed, because the church said, hey, we're interested in you, but we don't have any money. Can we keep your name as consideration? And when you spoke to him, what did you say?
Yeah, but like, I'm not looking for volunteer work. And so,
And so as time passed on, like God made it clear that we were supposed to be here. Even being a stay-at-home mom, I've had the ability to reach neighbors and have Bible studies in my home that otherwise I would have never been able to do if I was a traveling salesman, which is where this journey started. Have any of y'all had an experience where you had to walk away from wealth or opportunity so that you could be where God wanted you to be? Would anybody be willing to share it?
I was a salesperson in a hotel, and.
Could you speak up a little bit?
I'm sorry, I was a salesperson in a hotel,
that does not mean prostitute. That's very different.
Thank you, Michael.
No.
Thank you, Michael.
I sold, like, convention space, let's clarify that. But we had a newborn baby, and Tony was doing it on his own, and I missed everything the first year, and it really put a burden on me, and I told him, I'm like, I can't miss any more of JP's life, like, I can't miss him growing up. So we discussed it and everything, and I applied for a job that would have dedicated hours, because there was some weeks I would work 80 hours a week, because I would have to be there for the clients.
And it wasn't worth the sacrifice.
But
What field was that? I didn't catch. What field was that?
hotel sales.
Okay. Because I have something I want to share when you get through.
Well, thank you for sharing that. And it's tricky, and I think a lot of times we don't look at like where we're headed, and that's like when we're talking about finish line families, it's looking at where you're headed. Even when you involve your children in things, so I'm always looking at the older kids that are involved in the same things we're in, because I'm like, how'd they turn out, right? Like, is this a family that's worshiping the Lord? Is this a family that's committed to their church? How did that turn out for them? What were you going to say, Janet?
I worked in a field for over 30 years that I felt like I did a fairly good job, but for the people I work with. But because of the nature of the work and the status that they thought they had, it was a feeling of them being above other people, very arrogant, a lot of them. But there was one particular individual who was an older man that was like a grandfather to me, the grandfather I never had, because he was a Christian. And in the field that I was in, I didn't see a whole lot of that genuinely. There were church members, and there were people that would call and say, tell your boss that I want him to teach Sunday school Sunday. And I thought, really? But I never said that. I just thought, really, him? But I didn't, because that's really judgmental. But I remember just today, in fact, someone posted this question of a work situation. And the person I worked with did not like children, did not want children around. And of course, Anthony, our son, at that time was in daycare, and it was a matter of needing my income, and so I needed to work full-time, and I did, but I was a mother too. And so this particular day, the daycares called and said, your son is sick, you need to come pick him up. I did, and he threw up all over my clothes in the front seat of the car on the way to the doctor's office. I get to the doctor's office, and he says, you need to pick up this prescription, you need to go to the drugstore and get Pedialyte, and then wherever you need to place him for the rest of the day. So I made those errands while I was away from work. I had to leave work, tell my boss, and I'd rather take a laxative than have to tell him that I had to leave to go get my son, you know, from daycare. But in any event, I went and took care of his needs, went home, changed clothes, and came back to the office in late afternoon. And he was so disgruntled and so upset with me because I had done that. He didn't know, you know, he was so suspicious of me and made accusations to me. And I had to get letters from my employers. I mean, from my, the places I had been, to the daycare and to the doctor's office. That was placed in my personnel file. You think, all of this to have a job. And I was a legal assistant, full-time working legal assistant, but I was a mother too. And I had to have a come to Jesus meeting with him to let him know that somewhere in that mix, my motherly duties were going to have to take priority at times. So I think that jobs, that whole point was to say that sometimes jobs can cause people to lose their humility. They become arrogant and like I said, think they're above, that other people in this world don't have any sense, you know, that they know it all.
I think sometimes you just get caught up in it because like you get promoted or you get an excellent opportunity and you don't think about some of the costs that are involved to your
If
family.
If more money, you'll go for it a lot
Right.
of times.
Yeah, and that's just our nature. Eddie?
Got a question for you, I've been thinking about for a couple of weeks. Ask you, I guess, so I can get over it. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah.
I got a hearing aid on today because I can't ever hear it from here because
Tell me
the way this room is.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, we can hear you.
This is on here so I can hear these people because I don't want to miss anything. Anyway, so if I talk to them, I don't know. Every time you went to Michael and says, I want a baby, a new baby, did you ever think about or discuss how much it's going to cost, how you was going to afford it, and time after time, how did you even talk about that?
Usually he just said no. So I just prayed. So it was like
I mean, the long haul, did you ever think about
okay,
the dollars?
Yes, but I would say this. When I quit my job, what did I do, right? I sat down and looked at where our money went, and I realized really quick, Caroline's got to learn how to cook. Because if you look at your finances and you figure out how much is spent on restaurants with 2 people working, and we were victims of it because this is what we did. Well, so quickly I was like, awesome. So I set a goal, 60 meals. I'm going to learn how to make 60 meals. I'm going to fail along the way, and I'm not going to worry about it too much because really you don't have an option. We don't have any money, so I've got to learn how to cook. So I learned how to cook, but there was a plan, right? We lived in times.
Your last 3 kids.
Our last 3. Well, but I would say you start learning how to live on less. And then you start seeing God provide when you trust Him. And you learn there are things you do not need. There are wants that you got confused in your head that are needs that are not actually needs. So I think that Michael and I, we've realized now, have we put our children through college yet? No. Are we praying about it now? Yes. And that's if we don't know that they have to go to a 4-year college. We don't need to know that they need to go away to college. It's not that mentality, but we're praying we do want them employed, right? And we want them to have the skill set in order to get there. But we feel like we've been obedient to God's calling, and along the way, we've learned how to live on little. And we've been learning how to be really happy with that. When I look at these people that have a lot of money, I don't find them to be happy. Really, if you look at these celebrities that are gorgeous and loaded, they don't seem actually happy. Like many of them are divorced multiplied times. They're separated from their children. I don't find them happy.
Separated from modesty.
So it's like so I would say that like we didn't end up with 6 kids living on a nickel, right? Like it just kind of, you walk the path and each step you're obedient. And you pray and you see God provide, and so you trust for the next situation. But that's not to say that another time things are really tough and we couldn't afford preschool. And so really that was the first step in us homeschooling. And I know that people would say, well, preschool doesn't technically count. Well, when you're homeschooling Philip and Andrew together, it counts. Every moment of that counted. So it's like, I'm just saying that like, one, it's not actually that grand what we've done. I do think it's a little bit different. And that's why I want to share how we got there, because there's such beauty in the different. We didn't do expensive things with our kids. We went to the park a lot. All the time we went to the park. And then I even learned, like, I would make them make applesauce. And then I was like, oh my goodness, it's so cheap to buy applesauce. Why am I making applesauce? But then I found out, really, because it gave the kids, I made them peel apples for days, right? Like, that gave them something to do. For Catherine has learned how to quilt. You can buy a blanket much cheaper. But my child doesn't need to have a paid-for activity every afternoon. It's like, it's kind of Amish, really, right? Like, we're over here sewing, we're going to the, if I could have a cow, I'd make them milk it, absolutely. But we haven't gotten that yet. But so I would say, you learn how to live each step of the way and trust God for the next one.
Well, and that's not this. And please don't hear her or either one of us suggesting that. We have been, with respect to finances and material, we are particularly blessed. But life is also very expensive. We've got a large family, and just our food bill is particularly large, and that's not eating out. And so,
1 year in medical costs alone, with insurance premiums, and Michael had back surgery, it was $30,000. So then we've learned and researched it and adjusted paths so that we're more prepared for things like that in the future. In the insurance that we carry, and Aflac, like there's some things that we have adjusted. But there's a cost to obedience.
Yeah, but the obedience and the faithfulness brought peace to you.
Well,
With the sacrifices, you still had peace.
And let me back up to say this though too, with respect to modesty. Modesty is built on this principle that the aim is, whether you're talking about dress or you're talking about your possessions, the aim is not for me to draw attention to myself. That doesn't mean that you can't have something that's nice or decent, or that you've always got, that you've got to go furnish your house from the Dollar Tree. That's not. I'm not suggesting that, but modesty celebrates or has as its focus not to draw attention to me. Now, like for example, in the morning Bible studies, we're thinking about what Jesus says in the Sermon on the Mount, and there is a unifying theme that links everything that he says in the Sermon on the Mount, and it's the kingdom of God, and that Jesus is our King, and as such, he's establishing the norms for those that are part of his kingdom. And the standard that he wants us to operate with is very simply this: it's not about you. I'm following him, I'm serving him, it's not about me. And consistently, you've heard me talk about this 1,000 times over though, this word, you see it in Old and New Testaments repeatedly, the glory of God. Again, my definition very simply is this: the glory of God is any and everything that communicates that he is greater than anyone and everything. God is interested in my life as a follower of his to demonstrate his glory. Here's the question: can I be reflecting this in the absence of that? I really can't, because if this is absent, what am I doing? I'm saying, look at me. And what's God's desire? For me to say, to use me in such a way to do this. But and with respect to everything that we're talking about in finances and material things and using the money that's been entrusted to your care, especially American culture celebrates this. You think about look at HGTV. I'm not just talking about clothing, but just even with homes. And isn't it frustrating? You'll watch this couple, they've just Like the husband works at Chick-fil-A, the wife is at Starbucks. Our budget is $870,000, and you're like, but we are inundated with this notion that you've got to have this. And believers are not immune from this. And so with respect to finish line finances and material things, I want God to hear, or just be able to say to me, well done with this stuff that I entrusted your care. I'm not going to say, if I don't value, because he values this, because that makes him big. Me making me big, I'm not going to hear well done. So thinking modestly, and then as you do that, though, you'll discover, and as more time passes, then you discover how little this stuff matters and how much more this matters. And whether that's, to Caroline's point, like the opportunities and the experiences and the time with your kids, or just with other people, you discover that those relationships matter in ways that the stuff never has or never will.
And that's one of the other things that's like, God calls us to be, calls us to hospitality. Have people in our home, value relationships with other people. And if we're so preoccupied with ourselves or our children, chasing the next thing, it's really impossible to do that. I mean, it's stressful enough to have someone in your home for dinner as it is, but if all you're doing is, oh, we've got to get, like, the children will have a soccer practice every day of the week. Well, there's no room for that. Like, there's no room for showing hospitality. There's no room really for even generosity, which is another point that God calls us to be. God calls us to be generous. One of the things Michael always says to me is like that he who's faithful in little will be faithful in much. And so you want to be faithful.
Not as if I wrote that. I'm just, yeah.
I think they got that.
Yeah, I'm just making sure that I was not trying to take credit. Yes, that was above my pay grade.
But it's like, we want to be faithful with what he's given us, and we want to remember that everything is his. And it seems like, in regards to tithing, it seems like even the people who make a lot struggle with that, because their tithing might look different than our tithing. But in this age of debt, in this age of needing more, giving to the church is not a priority. And imagine what we could do with 250 members if everyone tithed. Imagine the amount of pastors we could have. Imagine the reach we could have in the community if people gave their finances as selflessly as they did in the New Testament. It's like we hoard it. It's ours. And as we chase the job that makes more, we've already spent it. We've already got the new car in the driveway, or we've already got the next thing that's going to cost us, and it doesn't satisfy us. When I questioned leaving one of the jobs, I told my friend, I said, it doesn't make sense to do this. And she said, but money will not satisfy you. The more you make, the more you will spend. And it was really true. When you find happiness, there's usually not a price tag to it. Like, you're not going to buy those earrings and all of a sudden be happy. Oh, finally, I've achieved happiness. The car won't do it. These other things won't do it. And even being generous with other people. I think that our culture in pushing this, yelling this, focus on yourself, acquire debt, you're not enough as you are, it makes us more selfish than we're supposed to be, which comes to like contentment. Like, how do we be content in all of this and all the needs that we're supposed to have, or all these things we're supposed to accomplish while we're here? How do we maintain contentment?
Keeping our eyes on glory. Keeping our eyes on, this is not our home. It really is, we're here temporarily. We're all in line for an appointment with God. We can't move up in the line, we can't move back in the line. We're here for a certain amount of time. And I just trust that.
And we're going to give an account for that time here.
Amen.
And like with what Michelle said, I always thought it was like gifts. This was gifts. Well, when we went to the talent, so it was like finances, like skills, like it was like gifts. So we're going to give an account of that. We're going to give an account of what we did with these children God's given us. We're going to give an account with how we spent our time here. We're going to give an account with how we spent our money here. I really want him to be pleased. I really want my decisions to reflect where my heart is, and that's with him, not on what the culture says we need. And the final thought, I'll be going back to Michael.
Yeah, and just so that we're staying on the same page here, if the end result is what I want the finish line to be, is that when I stand before the Lord, part of my giving an account is for him to, in response, say, well done. So just, we're saying, I'm wanting to, with respect to the stuff, I don't want to use it in such a way that I'm trying to draw attention to myself. Again, hear me in this. I'm not saying you can't have some nice things. But as you're weighing this and you're making financial decisions, if you're purchasing a home or you're purchasing a car, what is that saying? Is the aim of this to impress other people, or am I just trying to have something that's reliable and decent? This will affect your financial decisions. It just will, especially if you realize that as a follower of Christ, your aim is not to demonstrate that you're greater, but that He's greater, and that as you're doing this becomes a lot easier to discover. And it's the relationships, the people, especially other believers, and specifically your family, that are going to matter more than the stuff. As you do this, this liberates this, so that there is freedom to be generous, to give, whether it's to kingdom purposes or it's to other people, and help meeting needs. And we looked at the verse last week out of, where is it? Let me see. Godliness with contentment is great gain. I mean, it's 1 Timothy 6:6, godliness with contentment is great gain. God values this, where I decide what He's given me, I'm okay with. I don't have to have something more. I'm okay with this. And the last thing that Caroline and I had talked about was this. Unencumbered following. Listen to this verse out of Hebrews 12. Therefore, since we also have such a large cloud of witnesses surrounding us, that's the intro part, this is where the meat comes. Let us lay aside every hindrance and the sin that so easily ensnares us. Let us run with endurance the race that lies before us, keeping our eyes on Jesus, the author and the perfecter of our faith. To me, one of the operative terms in that verse is the word hindrance. There have been some seasons, there was a season in my life where I did some running. I didn't like it. I hated it. It lasted for a period of months, and no one should run unless something is chasing you or there's food off in the distance. But anyway, I was running for a while, and especially in the summertime, I would do this. But just think about whether you are a jogger or you have ever done any running, or you haven't. You can imagine what it's like to run. If you're going to run, what do you think? What are you going to go put on? Like, Roger, you got a pair of jeans on. If you say, I'm going to go run 3 miles, is that what you're going to wear? No. Why not a good pair of jeans? Do what? Do what? They're heavy. Yes, and then if you're like me, your legs rub together, there's a whole lot of heat that's generated. Corduroy's also off limits. So there's the weight. They also, even just with, like, if you compared jeans versus sweatpants, you've got freedom of mobility and weight. Jeans are a lot stiffer. If it's colder outside and you've got to have some sort of covering, are you going to find one of these? Do you remember what the kid looked like in A Christmas Story when he went? Do you want to have that kind of coat on? What do you want to have on? You're going to find some of that thin thermal stuff that doesn't weigh a whole lot. It's not real bulky. If you're trying to successfully run, you don't want to be weighed down, and you don't want to be restricted. Individually, and then as families, as followers of Christ, you're running. You're in a race. And you need to think about that my aim should be to do so in ways where I am not restricted, where I am not weighed down. Truly, it is the case in our families, all of our families, regardless of your stage in this, whether you have children that have already left the home, or you never had children, or you've got kids that are still at home, and in our case, even some that are still in diapers. If as you are making decisions in life, and as you're making decisions with respect to finances, we talked about this a little bit last week, all of those decisions have consequences down the road. And there are decisions that by virtue of the choices you make today financially, you can effectively close doors down the road. I mean, obviously debt is one of the big ones. And it's not going to be the case, especially in American life and culture, where we're going to be able to completely avoid it because, I mean, just even have a place to live, rare is going to be the occasion that you don't have to have a mortgage of some sort. But the question is not, am I going to be able to always avoid any form of debt, but am I going to experience debt in such a way where I can't do anything else? And so to me, this is the question. As I am, as you are, as your families are looking at your finances and you're making decisions about how money is spent and what you do with stuff, homes that you have or vehicles that you purchase, or any of that stuff, keep this in mind, that choices that you make about that, is it possible, or to what extent might that limit you being able to do something that God puts on your heart? I think that's a reasonable question, but the truth is a lot of times we don't think about that. We just think, all right, can I manage this payment month to month? I mean, like everything now is, we hardly look almost at, we're not buying anything. Even with software, I mean, like you don't buy software anymore. Like with Windows, it's a monthly fee. You're not buying CDs anymore. It's Spotify, it's Apple Music, it's what you got. Netflix. You don't own it. All these payments, and you're constantly, can I stomach this payment, this payment, this payment, this payment, this payment? But we rarely stop to ask ourselves this: my financial obligation to this, is that going to bind me or restrict me or weigh me down? Is it going to encumber me in my pursuit of following Christ? So if He puts on our heart as a family to do X, us deciding to do this today, is that even a possibility? And remember the statement I shared with you last week, not that it's especially profound, but I think there's a lot of truth in it, and that is that we need to operate this way, that you keep the most doors open. And so as a follower of Christ, as I'm evaluating financial decisions and how to manage my stuff that He's entrusted to my care, I want to do so in ways where I keep the doors open. So if He leads me down this path, I can do that. That I'm liberated, that I'm unencumbered, that I have cast aside that the stuff that would so easily ensnare me, that would trap me, that would bind me, that would restrict me. And so if I am doing these things, and I'm celebrating and I'm focusing on the stuff that God wants me to focus on, which and I'm not suggesting, and we're not suggesting these are all the things, but I think with respect to material things, I believe all these have biblical foundation. If I'm doing this, and if I'm operating this way, and these principles affect and guide and shape the financial decisions that I make, I think it makes it all the more likely that one of these days I stand before the Lord, because I will stand before the Lord and I will give an account that in this area of my life, this is what I get to hear. Well done, good and faithful servant. That should be, for all of us, the finish line that we're working towards. So hopefully these are some things that God may cause to percolate in your mind and heart in some of the specific ways that this intersects your family. And again, hear us in this. We're not saying, if you have something nice, get rid of it. Pawn it, hawk it, do it. We're not saying you can't have that. We're not saying that, we're just trying to give some general principles that I think really have biblical foundation that will have positive impact on your finances. So any other brilliant questions, additions?
A testimony. It's always be like.
So I'm getting ready to, yes.
You know, that in the 90s, when not long after I became a member here, we had the Together We Build to build this actual building that we're in now. We were in the little sanctuary, and the campaign was Together We Build, and we made pledges.
Right.
And I prayed about it, I go to lunch and pray, Lord, what can I do, what should I say is the figure that I will give over the next, year or whatever it was, 2 years, whatever it was now, I don't recall. But anyway, a figure was planted in my mind, and I thought, I don't know how I'm gonna do it, don't know where it's coming from, but I looked at my own, I have my own checking account, Donnie has his, but anyway, it works better for us that way. I can buy more shoes, but anyway, I know, that's one of those things that y'all pray for me. Anyway, it was near the year end at work, and I had turned in my, Together We Build commitment here at the church. And at year end, we always got a bonus, and then we got the amount that we were going to be increased in salary for the next year. When the attorney I worked with then called me in his office and told me what my increase would be for the next year, it was that exact dollar, to the penny, it was that exact dollar of the pledge I had made. And I mean, just being faithful and working and doing what the Lord wanted me to do. And I was so amazed that I all came together like that. But it's when you do what you're asked to do and directed to do and led by the Lord, it'll all come together.
Well, sure. And
I'm worried over it. How am I going to do this? You know?
And that goes a little bit to Eddie's question earlier, though, about with respect to having some children, then continuing to have more. Did we think about the expense of that? But in part, the response is this: that at the end of the day, if God guides you to do something, you feel like this is part of His plan for you, somehow, some way, He's going to work out the details. But you need to make sure that you're not operating in ways that effectively close those doors so that you can't do that. So. Anyway, let me pray for us tonight, and thank you for being here. Father, we're grateful to you for a chance to think through these issues tonight, and for every single one of us, there are things that you have entrusted to our care. We are your servants. We are those that have been given possession of temporarily a whole lot of things. I pray, God, that we would be prudent and we would be wise and we would be using those things in ways that one of these days, as we stand before you, we're going to hear well done. If we're on paths right now that aren't going to help us to accomplish that long after we leave, I pray that there's conversations in homes that take place where some adjustments may need to be made, or that we just get quiet enough to hear you speak to us about some ways in which we may need to pivot or change directions. So I pray that you have, I pray that you'll continue to speak and guide. That's our prayer, and we ask in Jesus' name. Amen.